Press A to play.
But yeah, like they did the same thing to Tifa, you know? And it's just, why, guy? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. She was an attractive character, I guess, in the original too, so it's not like they're straying from that, but they really turned it up to like 11 and a half on the remake. It was so distracting. Huh. The bump in the back of the head still works. So what did you think of like Master Chief's interaction with Cortana, like it developing into a sort of borderline romance?
Weird. Like.
Are you?
Okay. Like especially because they're war buddies, and if she were a male AI in this fiction with like a US American developer and everything, I like almost 100% sure that AI would have been like his ultimate war buddy and his ultimate comrade and the person he shared all those experiences with, and it never would have to go into a romantic direction.
Yeah.
And just because of her gender, it goes into a more romantic direction in the games, which to me is like, it feels like the sort of cheap, obvious, like, well, if we've got a guy and a gal together, we're gonna need to have them hook up at one point. Where I'm like, it would be so much more valuable to me, at least, if you would have like a male and a female character in a game like this, who would have the same kind of beautiful relationship you could have with like two war buddies who've been through hell together and who can rely on each other. But just because of their genders, there has to be like a romantic undertone, which it takes away from it for me personally. It's not like, I'm not going to say that makes it objectively bad or they shouldn't have done it, but to me it would have been more interesting if it never developed any romantic undertones. Oh shit. Also, I mean, Master Chief and the Arbiter, that would have been a romance too.
A missed opportunity there.
Oh yeah, most definitely.
Especially because they're so yin-yang, you know? Like in Halo 2, they paint them to be so yin-yang.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I kind of don't like this idea that, you know, there has to be a love story in every story.
Yeah.
I did think it was kind of cool to reconceive of AI as like almost living though.
I get that.
That aspect I thought was kind of cool, but yeah, it like totally felt shoehorned in a bit.
Yeah, that's why I think I said it the way I did. Like, I personally would have appreciated a different direction more, but I'm not going to be the person to say like, oh, it's horrible they did it and they did it completely wrong. And like, I don't have that feeling actually. It's just more that, for me personally, it feels like a missed opportunity. But I think there's a lot to say for the direction they went in, and I'm pretty sure for a lot of people that is the case. Yeah.
Does it continue on like that in the? Well, maybe I shouldn't ask.
I think it does. There's a lot of like intimate moments between them, I think, in Halo 5, yeah, especially Halo 5, I think, yeah.
I think I blew myself up.
Uh-oh. Tobias Funke here. I think I blew myself.
Yuck, yuck, yuck.
Okay.
I'm mad noobish at this game now.
I think I've shot like 2 Covenant or something.
The Marines are doing all the work for us.
Hey guys. Oh no. No. Love their sounds.
Yeah, they did a great job with their sounds, but like, it's one of these things that simultaneously makes me feel guilty because somehow they're cute, you know?
Hey.
Like, oh my god, they're here! Pistol here. Fresh.
Covenant on the landing above us.
Okay. Blow shit up.
Yo. But they have the higher ground. These Marines are brave. Wow, I suck.
I'm just glad you're not you're not looking at my screen because I'm not doing all too great myself.
I remember feeling like I was good at this game at one point. It took quite a bit of work to get there, though, especially with a controller, you know?
Oh, I remember those days where I would, when I was working at a game shop back in Haarlem, I would, like, almost every Friday night with my two colleagues, I would go to their place and we'd have, like, 2 TVs hooked up and they would have other friends coming over as well.
Oh,
and we'd
sweet.
play, like, Halo 3 multiplayer for, like, hours and hours and hours on end. Those were amazing days, and I actually got sort of decent at Halo 3 because of that, but I never played it, like, as soon as I moved to Amsterdam. Like, I never played it anymore, so yeah.
Oh, that's a pity. I remember those kinds of evenings, too. It was so good.
Oh, yeah.
There was something about, like, bringing the Xbox over and finding a way to carry in the extra TV. Just have these LAN parties.
Split screen and LAN parties are still I just never pretty much play online multiplayer games. I just don't like it. I love offline multiplayer, though.
Yeah, true.
I hate that about being an adult with responsibilities and a job. Like, I have no friends anymore, basically. And I have like a lot of geeky friends, but like the huge majority of my friends aren't into games. But like even the geeky friends I do have aren't exactly prepared to meet up regularly and play like Super Smash or Mario Kart or something, which is a shame because I love that stuff.
Yeah, they did. I feel like this last edition of Smash especially just lowered the bar so anybody can come and mash buttons, and that just makes it so much fun, you know?
Oh yeah, that's the first Super Smash Brothers I mean, obviously I didn't buy the 3DS version, but that's because I didn't want it, and I had the Wii U version, which is basically the same game, but, you know, better.
Nice.
But yeah, it's the first Smash I didn't buy because it looks amazing and I really want to play it, but I'm not gonna pay 60 euros for a single player Super Smash experience. That's like a shame.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense.
Look at that.
Oh, look at this. Where's the flashlight? Do you remember where the flashlight is?
Like up in the D-pad, I think, right?
Oh, here it is. It's the left shoulder.
Oh, it's up in the D-pad for me.
Oh,
You and your weird control config.
what have I done? Oh, it's locked. Can't get out this way.
Isn't that the name of a mission as well? Lock and key or something?
Uh-huh.
Because like lock, yeah.
Wow.
Wait, who was Locke again? Was that like a captain or was it a bad guy? I can't remember. There's like a character called Locke.
Yeah.
In Halo, right?
Yeah, and I remember thinking, I think the same thing that you were thinking, right? Is that you have Captain Keys?
Oh yeah, that's the. Oh yeah.
But who was Locke? Or am I misremembering this?
Yeah, maybe I have been watching a 6.5-hour long video on Lost the last couple of days.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, it's
Intense.
Yeah, and people wonder why I'm not in a relationship right now. It's an amazing video though. I would recommend it to anyone. It's like this amazing deep dive into like the creative process. Oh shit! I'm gonna.
Nice. Good job.
I love Ramboing in there. Boom. But yeah, no, it's a 6.5-hour video. And before, it's the second actually in this series. He also made a 3-hour video. But it's a 6.5-hour long video on like the second and third seasons of Lost, where he basically gets into the actual plot, but also like the production and like the dynamics between ABC and Disney, and it's like really interesting stuff.
Oh, wow.
And I love it because it's interesting to get into like the actual like sort of creative stuff, but also to, you know, all of the behind the scenes stuff and like how TV got produced basically back in the day. It's really interesting to actually listen to him talk about that.
Yeah, okay. There's got to be a lot of interesting material there because Lost was huge for a while. You know, like I remember everybody was just binge watching it,
Yeah.
just swallowing up the seasons.
And it's just really interesting, especially because there were like a lot of people obviously bitching on how it ended, and like it was the classic, oh, they're just writing it as they go along. And because of that video he made, it's like so easy to see like it was such a horrifying experience for the showrunners, because like even before season 2 got greenlit, they went to like the studio heads and they were like, we need an end date. We can write a good show, but we need to know when it's gonna end, and we need to know when, because we need to start like laying the groundwork for, you know, an ending. We need to get our themes and our arcs like in order to do that. And the studio was like, yeah, no, we're making money. We're not gonna talk about an ending. People are watching. Why would we talk about an ending? And that was like the sort of status quo for like several seasons. And it was driving the showrunners crazy.
Several seasons.
Yeah, and like Damon Lindelof was a writer, and he was brought in as a writer, and then J.J. Abrams left literally within a couple of episodes. So out of nowhere, Damon Lindelof was, as a young guy and a writer, running the biggest show on TV with like the biggest budget ever. And then that biggest show on TV also became video games and books and merchandise, and he had to sort of quality control all of that, which was insane because he had no experience. He's like, I suddenly was the CEO of a major corporation and I had no experience with that.
Yeah, my God.
And at one point they actually started sort of defying Disney, because they were on press tour for season 4, I think, or season 3 maybe, and they like publicly said on that press tour like, oh yeah, we're gonna end the show within 2 seasons, and we can't go on any longer than that. Disney was furious. They were like, yeah, no. Bit after that, Disney went up to them and they were like, you know what, you guys, we understand you. We're gonna end the show at one point. They're like, oh, thank you for listening to us. And Disney was like, after 10 seasons.
Oh my God.
And they were like, okay, but that's the same as not having an end date.
Yeah, what the hell?
They were
How
like-
do you even do that?
Yeah.
Man? How do you run a show without knowing when it's gonna end for
Yeah.
years?
And they were like, this is agonizing, because we were stressing out when we were told to go from like a pilot to 13 episodes to 25 episodes for the first season. We were panicking the fuck out when we had to suddenly write a second season.
Yeah.
How do you expect us to make a 10-season series? Like, we cannot give you that. You agreed with us in the beginning that you can either have a good show on for a handful of seasons, or not. You agreed with us in that. You cannot go back on that and be like, oh yeah, we can have a good show go on for 10 seasons. We told you that's impossible. You agreed. Don't make us do this.
Yeah.
It was like a shit show behind the scenes.
Oh man.
Yeah.
That makes me feel bad for bashing it all these
Oh yeah.
years.
And especially because Damon Lindelof has he's seriously one of the most talented people in TV, because he did like The Leftovers and Watchmen afterwards, like the Watchmen HBO TV show.
Oh, that was good.
Yeah, like he has shown that he is an amazingly talented showrunner, and I personally loved Lost until the end. I loved the ending. I completely understand why a lot of people didn't. I'm not going to say it was a good ending. It was, for me, a satisfying ending, but I can totally understand why it wasn't for a lot of people. But to me, it's obvious that the things that didn't go right with Lost weren't because of like them being creatively bankrupt. It was because of ridiculous demands and pressures from the studio. So yeah, it's and we haven't seen anything like it since then. Like, if you think about it, like Lost was ridiculously expensive and weird and experimental and new and different, and like honestly, we still haven't had anything like it since. And I think it really deserves its place in TV history as like a milestone. It's like a really important sort of, it really changed that landscape dramatically. So
I do think there's an interesting parallel with Game of Thrones, in the sense that Game of Thrones also did a lot of things that were, from my naive perspective about like plot points and stuff like that, did a bunch of stuff that at the very least were super unexpected.
Yeah.
But for as much as like Game of Thrones dabbled with it a little bit, Lost turned a lot of those things all the way up to 11, where you were just like, I don't know what's going on, and like, how is this even a thing? And
Also, for me, a big difference between the two is that it's for me easy to have goodwill towards Lindelof and Hughes because they were, like, even while Lost was on, like, this is really fun stuff actually. Like, a lot of the podcasts they were on and stuff like that, they were like openly opposing Disney. They were like openly discussing how horrible it was to work on Lost and how they were forced to do all kinds of things they didn't want to do.
Oh my
but
God.
they, until the end, it was still a labor of love for them, and they were seriously until the end sort of fighting for their show. And to me, it feels like Benioff and Weiss with Game of Thrones, it was obvious that in the last couple of seasons, they were not passionate anymore. They were not willing to go the extra mile. They were not willing to wrap it up in like a way that sort of did the show justice. It's always felt to me like they kind of abandoned their baby near the end.
yeah,
Whereas Lost was just, I can still, even when it's not firing on all cylinders, I can still kind of see the passion and the love behind the scenes. Whereas with Game of Thrones, it just, at one point, it felt really phoned in.
yeah, I felt like it just Game of Thrones. I felt like it just suddenly fell off a cliff.
Yeah.
You know, where it was like this incredibly cool and interesting thing, and then out of nowhere, dude, what's going on here? You know, kind of thing.
Yeah. But it just became a different show. That's the part that still baffles me. It went from like this intricate fantasy light sort of political drama it turned into like I hate, as you know, I not hate, but I have a pretty big dislike for Western fantasy. I just don't really like Western fantasy. It's not my thing. It's why I've never gone into like Dungeons and Dragons and Warhammer and stuff like that. It's just Lord of the Rings. It's not my thing. I'm not gonna go like it's bad. It's not my thing.
Yeah,
You know,
it doesn't do it for you.
You have things that you like and things you don't. I don't like Western fantasy. So when like Game of Thrones was recommended to me, I was like, yeah, no, that's not my thing. Then I started watching after a friend he just kept insisting it to watch it. And I was like, okay, I'll give it a try. The fact that I watched the entire show says a lot because it drew me in with its like interesting characters and its cool
It
political
didn't
dynamics.
feel like Western fantasy,
Yeah.
right? It didn't feel like that at all.
Yeah, that was like the set dressing. Like, oh yeah, it's a world where there's talk of dragons and magic, and there are dragons and there is magic, but that's not what it's about. It's not about the concepts. It's about people and politics and cultures and clashes, and like I like that stuff. And it felt like a lived-in, physical, actual world. Like if someone had to go from one side of the country to the other, they would, that would take several episodes. And then in the last 2 seasons, basically, and it started dropping before that even, like the last 2 seasons, it became everything I hated. It became like a Dungeons and Dragons-esque show. It turned into like just dragons and magic and all of that shit all the time, and it wasn't about believable character like motivations anymore.
All the characters turned into very strange people all of a sudden, you
Like
know?
cardboard cutouts.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
They weren't interesting characters anymore, but just so one-dimensional.
It's like, I don't even know who you are anymore.
Yeah, and
who are you?
It became way more plot-driven than character-driven, and that's my biggest issue. Like, I loved character-driven Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
And at the end, it wasn't about, okay, what would this character's personality lead to, but it was, we want there to be a big battle between this and this side. How are we gonna get there? Okay, so we need this character to do this and that.
Yeah, we'll just bring this character back to life and, I don't know, conjure up a dragon for me, would ya? And
I those first few seasons were just like, and the horrifying thing is that because of that change, like there's no way for me to rewatch the first seasons and enjoy them because they were interesting because you were interested in what that would lead to, as in, is the hubris of this character going to lead to this, but there's no way to enjoy that because the build-up in those first few seasons gets completely undone in the last 2. So it just feels pretty futile to me to sort of watch it, to rewatch it. It's such a shame.
But to me, it also deserves a place in TV history because, like, they undid everything so completely. You know what I mean? Like, you would have to try to ruin something that completely, where like nobody gives a shit about it anymore.
It's seriously impressive how badly they fucked it up.
Yeah.
And they had like all the talent and budget and time. They had everything.
Yeah. And everybody was talking about it, and it was like the biggest thing ever. really, people who weren't interested in that kind of thing at all were watching this thing
Yeah.
and talking about it and making predictions too. They were like, "Oh no, let me tell you what I think is going to happen." It was a huge deal.
But it's like, again, it's like the opposite of Lost, because the funny thing is that apparently behind the scenes, HBO was like, we would love for you to wrap this up decently. We would love for you to take like 2 more seasons, for example. You can have as much money as you want. We can get you the actors you need, like all of that. They were like very much
Very
supportive.
nice.
And Benioff and Weiss were basically like, yeah, no, we have other plans, because they were, don't forget, they were making deals with Lucasfilm. They were signed on for like a Star Wars trilogy and shit.
Yeah, that's what I heard. They were going to write a trilogy.
Yeah, that got, canceled since then. But they weren't, their eyeballs weren't on Lost anymore, Game of Thrones anymore. They were just thinking of what's next. They were thinking of all the possibilities that Game of Thrones opened up for them.
Yeah.
But it was obviously they wanted to get out. They wanted to be done with Game of Thrones, and they just messily closed, and just
I think
wrapped up everything.
I think it was too big for them.
Yeah.
There's like, when you think about it, really, there were so many characters, so many plot lines, and
But
okay,
that's what I hate. That's the one thing I hate. I'm sorry, I really hate about Benioff and Weiss. Like, for me, that's an ego thing. Like, they could have easily been like, we're not as passionate as we were, and this is a huge show and a huge job,
Yeah.
and we need the show for its last few seasons to be run by people who, the show needs showrunners that have, that have like their undivided attention.
yeah, they
And-
have their eye on the ball.
Yeah, and they didn't do that. They were like, we're gonna end it, even though we don't feel all that motivated to end it. They could have handed it over to other showrunners. They could have handed it over to the writer's room. They could have basically be honest and be like, yeah, we're not as enthusiastic as we were, and that's a shame, but we do want the show to end on a high. And they didn't do that. They just sloppily ended it themselves, and that's what really gets me sort of pissed.
Are they going to be known for that?
Yeah, because there's a reason Lucasfilm canceled their trilogy. Obviously, it didn't help, the fan backlash with The Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker being a piece of shit, and Solo being, like, in Star Wars terms, a flop. But there's a reason they just completely severed ties with Benioff and Weiss for Star Wars, because they saw what happened in those last few Game of Thrones seasons.
It's kind of hard to miss.
I think Benioff and Weiss haven't really done anything big since, actually.
Yeah, I hate to be vindictive, but there's a big part of me that's kind of like, God, I hope not,
Yeah.
Because again, I was, like, I'm thinking of the first maybe 4 seasons of Game of Thrones. I was so into it
Oh, yeah.
just because so much of it was intricate and, like, again, totally unexpected, It felt like nobody had plot armor.
Dude,
and it
Game
felt
of
like-
Thrones at its best is still peak TV. Like, so
Yeah.
goddamn good.
Yeah. Yeah. And in quite a few ways. I mean, also, to be fair, they pushed the buttons a little bit too much at some points. Like, you kind of felt like, dude, we really didn't need this rape scene.
Yeah, oh yeah. But, yeah.
Like, I can kind of understand maybe that they wanted to push extremes, like they wanted everything to feel extreme.
I do love how the term sexposition came into existence because of Game of Thrones.
Oh, yeah? So I hadn't heard about this.
Because you had exposition and, at one point there were like a lot of scenes
Yeah.
where people were having sex and also basically discussing strategies or who to stab in the back and stuff like that, and those scenes were then called sexposition. I love that.
There were definitely times when you felt like it did add something, right?
Yeah.
Like it added a layer to this story or that story. But again, there were a couple times where it was like, really, you really didn't need to rape this person like this.
Yeah, and the way, for example, the love interest of Tyrion at one point, I'm not sure if spoilers are still a thing, but yeah, like Shay, his love interest,
Yeah.
that apparently she was also in bed and cahoots with his dad, but that was like all of that stuff basically, I think all of that exposition happened in like one scene where like this interesting multifaceted three-dimensional character of Shay got turned into like this sort of
Whore.
horrifying stereotype of like, ha, women can't trust him, right?
Yeah.
I was like, she had lines and a background and like a personality, and she was like really cool and interesting. And then out of nowhere, it's like, oh yeah, no, she stabbed him in the back just because she's a bitch, right? It was like, they
Yeah.
really
I don't
fucked
know.
over that character.
I felt like they took a cardboard cutout
Oh,
of
sorry.
the quote unquote horror archetype and were just like, yep, all right, that's her. And
It's still because I loved her and I loved her character, and she was so interesting and so cool, and she was like such an interesting match for Tyrion. She was like this cool, independent, like really sort of like strategic, smart, awesome
yeah, I was
character.
gonna say
who worked,
shrewd.
yeah, and she like worked her way up like crazy.
Yeah.
Like not in a manipulative kind of way. Like she was just so sort of in perfect tune with like the way that world operated, and she knew exactly how to fend for herself. And then in the end, she just turned into like you mentioned, like this sort of archetype of like the untrustworthy like prostitute or like whore. Like it was just they undid all the goodwill I had, you know. Like
I gotta give it to Peter Dinklage for managing to still continue like acting well. Don't let
oh
me.
yeah, like his character turned like God. They really assassinated his
Oh
character.
my god, why did they make him so dumb in the end? They turned him into
Like he turned into like the most sort of
putsy.
impotent character ever. He couldn't do anything, and it's such a shame because like Dinklage was so good in that role. Oh man, like if I have to think of like current like modern day actors with like just this intimidating amount of screen presence, like Dinklage is up there.
Actually throughout that entire series,
Yeah.
every scene he was in, you know, and again, even after they had like completely wrecked his character, he still managed to,
Bring his A game.
yeah, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like he managed to be convincing.
Yeah.
And I mean, I have to admit, like, it made my heart break for him sometimes because I was like, yeah, but why did they make you such a putz? But he's still like, he's still there giving it his all.
Still dinkling it up in there. Yeah.
I'm going the wrong way. Do I know where I'm going?
Are we?
Oh, is this the right way?
I don't know. I want to think it is.
Oh, no, I'm pretty sure it's wrong. Yeah, no, there's like a bridge
This is where we're
underground or
from.
something.
Oh wait, but there's a thing happening there.
Okay.
So maybe let's go that way, because maybe there's like a 4th of July celebration or thing. I don't know.
We're going to the barbecue.
Covenant barbecue would probably be pretty disturbing though.
Yeah.
Like Spartans on a like roast the Spartan.
Do you think they eat the Spartans?
I mean, why wouldn't they?
I feel like that would be a sin, you know?
Yeah, I think we were here before. Yeah, you were right. Yeah, we have to go back.
We knew that.
We have to go back.
I'll be back. But yeah, I felt like they had made such a wonderful character in Tyrion generally, like this disadvantaged person in this cruel world who is so bright and like just finds all these ingenious ways to like make their way through the world and then suddenly turns into a putz.
Oh yeah, but seriously, I mean, if we're gonna go with that, that also applies to Daenerys,
Oh, yeah.
Littlefinger, Varys, like all of those characters turn into like parodies of themselves, and I loved all of those characters.
That's a good point.
Like, Sansa as well. Like, so many of those characters were just.
I did at least feel as if they wanted Sansa to come full term. Like this idea of her becoming this political genius or whatever
yeah.
it is was kind of somewhere in there, you know.
No,
and
the arcs, that's the thing. The arcs weren't even all that bad. Like, Daenerys as well. Like, Daenerys, like, I hated her, but not as in her being a bad character. But, like, for me, from the get-go, it's like, this is a character who believes she's entitled to rule an entire continent just because of her blood.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't get all the Daenerys stands, because she's like, she's just itching to become a despot. Like, she's itching to become like a tyrant. Like, yeah, sure, she's not as bad as the last couple of tyrants, but I was never able to root for her.
Yeah.
And her character turning into like, you know, a horrifying tyrant, that to me, that makes sense. Like that's an arc I can understand. The way they did it though was like have her character slowly inch towards that, and then at the end, like in an instant,
I'm crazy now.
It was like it was like if she started out here and this was her destination, and she was just driving at like 60 or 70 miles an hour like throughout most of the show, and then when she had like more than half of the way to go, she just went like, fuck it, I'm gonna hit the gas, and she just went like over 200 miles an hour.
Yeah.
And that just completely ruined that arc for me.
I also think generally, like, similar, like, with Jon Snow sort of coming to the conclusion that he comes to, you know, at the end,
Oh yeah,
was something that should have grown a little bit,
yeah, true.
but that also felt like it was 0 to 60
Yeah,
in the fraction of a second. And I didn't understand that either, you know? Like, that could have been cool, but it just, I don't know. So much of it just...
nothing could breathe in those last 2 seasons.
No.
There was no time for any of the stuff that was going on to sort of sink in or to
develop.
yeah.
Ugh. I have to say, I love the sounds they put into this game.
Oh yeah. Oh, okay. Please don't kill me. That sound is still so good.
Zug, zug, zug.
How cool would that be in real life? Like every time you would like be hooked up to like an IV, you'd have like this sound.
You trip and fall over, or you stub your toe and you're like, ow! Ow. Ooh. It just comes back.
I could have used that this afternoon when my sunburn was sort of taking place, when that was happening. It would have been cool for my body to basically be like, yo, you're losing health, man.
Yo,
do something.
I totally wish the shield was a real thing. I want one.
Oh yeah.